From where the West begins in Fort Worth, Texas, to around the globe, you are listening to Talk in the Night. I'm your host, Paranormal Phil, and later on in the show tonight, we're going to be joined by my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot, his sightings, and his research into them. But first, cattle mutilations baffle Williams rancher. John Manhan adjusts his well-worn cowboy hat as he leans against his dust-covered Jeep and points towards some juniper trees where several days ago he found two of his cattle mysteriously slaughtered. I thought they had been shot. I didn't realize what had happened, he said. There are parts missing. They were mutilated. A cow and a bull were both killed overnight. An ear cut off, a section of hide detached, the scrotum and I'm not going to say that word, carefully removed, the vaginal cavity gone, the blood drained, and all this kind of goes with the whole thought of UFOs doing this mutilation and everything like that. But yes, it could possibly be done by something else, especially such as possibly cryptid creatures such as the chupacabra and stuff like that. But we're going to get into cryptozoology creatures, especially Bigfoot, with my guest, Ed Roman. So please welcome to the show, Ed.
Hey, Phil. How you doing?
I am doing very well. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. It's great to have you on the show. So please tell all the listeners a little bit about yourself and
kind of who I am and what I do. I'm a Canadian singer-songwriter. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, a storyteller, if you will, but at the same time, I've been pursuing music my entire life, and I work a lot in the U.S., to tell you the truth. Most of my music is pushed around the U.S. Right now, I've just actually released a video with well-known animator Nelson Diaz for the title track of my latest record, which is an animated short. And that's actually showing at film festivals all over the U.S., New York, New Jersey, Los Angeles. It's also been showing in Europe, in Moscow, and Sicily. But, that's what I do with my life. It's sort of an ongoing thing, and I'm not going to stop until they put me in the ground. But I'm an enthusiast of a multitude of things when it comes to like the paranormal. My family's had a mass sighting, if you will. I've had my own personal, if you will, Sasquatch or what there's no other way for me to explain it other than such. And I've been an enthusiast for this kind of a thing pretty much my whole life, because this sort of permeates into my family's existence even back to before we came to Canada. My grandmother had a brother even that was born with all of his hair and teeth and could already speak and predicted the day that he would die. I grew up like listening to stories like this around the kitchen table at dinner time, So the idea that the possibilities of the unnormal were a reality sort of, perked my curiosity and still that way. So
yeah. Well, I've been in the paranormal field for 27 years. Well, 25 of it active. The last 2 years I retired from the field because I've seen and done quite a bit in my time in the field. But I've had my first experience with spirits when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And ever since then, I've been able to see and communicate with spirits. But I've always, since that time, I've had interest in the paranormal. And I'm not talking just ghosts and spirits. I'm talking about UFOs, cryptozoology creatures. And I'll tell you a funny story. Now, most kids, when they're growing up, they want toys. And, of course, my parents would take me and my sister up to Calgary for the Stampede during the summer months. And we're driving through Wyoming, and my sister wanted a toy. Me, I picked up a book on Bigfoot. That's what I wanted.
Well, but you know what? So I get it, because there were a lot of books in the library that we had at home, including the old Encyclopedia Britannica, but I remember a whole bunch of books that were there was the Eric von Doniget series of Chariots of the Gods. There was the one that it was basically about the Patterson-Gimlin film, and a whole sort of picture breakdown of what was shot and what was done and how it was all captured and everything. Those were the books I went for right away as a kid. And again, but at the same time, the fear had to leave me, because I remember approaching those books and looking at the covers and almost being terrified, because I kind of already knew what was possibly going on without actually getting into it. And it wasn't until I was a little older, in my early teens and stuff, that I was like, well, I want to check more of this out. But again, it was either a guitar or something paranormal. I didn't want the G.I. Joe or the video games. It was an instrument was paramount for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had toys like Atari and stuff like that. And probably some of my younger listeners are going, what? But
Pong.
Yeah. But I still always remain interested in the stuff that most people don't know about. I mean, the paranormal field, up until fairly recently, with all the TV shows and stuff like that, was unknown.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't talk about it, or in many cases, from what I understand, are also afraid to talk about it because ridicule or being, told that you're crazy or something like that, losing your validity in the community because you saw something, I think a lot of people don't talk about it. And when you start doing research, you start realizing, well, wait a minute, there are certain parallels to certain things. Like for me, okay, aside from the experiences that I've had, my family, I have to, like we were talking off air, I want to know why something works and what's going on with it. And when you start, even in your own experience, doing what's the confirmation on this math, in my family's experience, the local airport and the observatory that was in our area had reported tracking 6 different unidentified flying objects in the area that night. So the allegory, in the story that my family would talk about, had that sense of here's the newspaper clippings. And we saw something, and we are still, processing, what it is that we, saw. And again, I think that's what it is too. There's a certain amount of fear, not only in telling the story, but in the experience itself. I won't lie to you, Phil. When I had my Bigfoot experience, I was terrified to the point where I was in process of leaving fight or flight mode, and at the same time, my curiosity was so perked that I think my head was turned halfway around trying to double check everything that was occurring while it was occurring, and then not being able to go back to my own bush and forest for 6 months because I was afraid. And it was a place I traversed on a regular basis with my dog and my wife, and I love being in the bush. I've been in the bush a number of times in my life. I used to spend a lot of time camping here in northern Ontario. And I've been in part of the food chain. I've had a black bear experience, and black bears aren't as aggressive as a brown or a grizzly, but still, to be as close as I was at 2 o'clock in the morning with nothing but a bit of tent between me and a large female, You start to realize, well, this is kind of where that same sense of fear that you don't know what's about to happen, and then trying to do some of that research to determine what is it that exactly happened to me. Because even after it occurred, it took me a little while to try to process it, tell my wife, and then the very next person I called was my mom, because I was like, if there's anybody that's going to believe you, or you'll be able to tell your story to, it's got to be your mom or dad or somebody like that, or one of your brothers or sisters or a really good friend, right? So, again, there's that fear thing from both angles. Either the fear of even telling somebody what happened, and also the fear of the experience just maybe will shut people down. And that's another reason why they don't say anything.
Yeah. Well, it took me a while before I ever said anything about my first and only Bigfoot sighting, which was in 92. I was living up in Northern California, and I worked with a group, like a training thing for young kids or young adults to get into the workforce. And I was out in the redwood forest cleaning logs out of the stream. Well, of course, out there are no restrooms. So you have to go off into the bush and do your thing. And I'm doing that, and I'm sitting there. We made our own makeshift toilet with a toilet seat that we brought, but so we're not sitting on logs. But
yeah, it's uncomfortable hanging over the edge or from a branch,
But we're out there, and I'm sitting there doing my thing, and I see this creature standing on two legs. I want to say it was about 10 to 12 feet tall. And, of course, going back to when I bought the book about Bigfoot and doing all the research that I had done, I was like, I'm not moving, because I don't know what something that size is going to do to me if it sees me.
Right. Exactly.
And of course, I got back to my work site. Once it left, they asked, "What took you so long?" I was like, "Yeah, it took a while." That's all I could say. I was not going to let others know what I saw.
So did you leave before it did?
No, it just kept walking. It was probably, I want to say, about 500 yards away, but it didn't see me because I was kind of behind a bush.
So you were obviously downwind of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you're doing your thing too, right?
Yeah.
But you probably just didn't want to say anything because, okay, we're here to do a job. I was just taking a dump in the bush, and I saw something that I really can't explain even to myself at this moment. And again, that's what I was saying before. It's like the processing of it, because in my own experience, where we're back on 50 acres to a hardwood bush, and there's a cedar bush back there, and a creek. It runs. It's a tributary of a system that comes out of a protected area that's just about a couple miles east of us. And we got a lot of wildlife. We've got deer. We've got grouse. We have porcupine. We have, you name it, it's here. And people hunt as well.
Yeah.
And our dog has been chased by coyotes, and they work together, as they do. And I was going out to the garden at about 6:30, and it is July the 6th, and I remember the date exactly, and I hear the coyotes going nuts. And ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard the coyotes, when they're yipping and yipping, then they go through this mode of there's a bit of a shutdown, and if they're in a fight or ripping something apart, you can definitely hear the carnage, and it's just crazy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But this is happening at like 6:30. And I'm like, that's kind of an unusual time for the coyotes to be out doing what they're doing, because they're nocturnal most of the time, or late, dusk, and that kind of a thing. So regardless, I grabbed the dog, put him in the house, and the way our property is, it comes to a rise, and then it slopes down on an angle across that acreage, and it hits the bush line. And what I saw, and I said to myself, the first thing I said to myself is, why is there somebody wearing a skidoo suit, a black skidoo suit, with a balaclava on a hot July day, standing there? And then I'm thinking, I can hear the coyotes, but they're not coming out of the bush. And I thought, so this is the first thing. I'm confused by what am I seeing? And whatever I'm seeing seems to be pretty tall. It's hard to judge at this moment because I'm still trying to go, like, what is this person doing there?
Yeah, you're trying to find out who's on your property.
Well, that too, but I mean, that's okay, and that's all right. But what confused me more is, like, it's hot. It's really hot out.
Yeah.
And who in their right mind would be wearing a skidoo suit and a balaclava, unless they're up to no good or something like that? It crouches down, and I lose sight of it in all this bramble. And almost within a second or two, it bolts out on all fours. It's standing upright at when I originally saw it. The coyotes go quiet at that point, and in about like 10 bounds, it moves an astonishing amount, like almost half of that acreage, stops, stands up on 2 feet, turns to its left, and it keeps walking on like a sort of a diagonal out of that pasture area. And I'm on one knee, sort of half genuflected, in half turn, looking over my left shoulder and like wondering, do I run? Because what is this running after me? Because that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I'm baffled by, like, wait a minute, it just was running on all fours and then stood up and now it's walking. So again, I'm processing. What is this that's going on? So you're afraid. You're trying to, like, take in the information at the same time. And as it leaves and it walks away from me and I lose sight of it over this sort of, like, tree line that's there, and then it goes down into a slope towards the creek line, I go back into the house. And, the dog's fine. There's nothing wrong or anything like that. But like I said, as soon as my wife came home, I was like, honey, sit down for a second. Like, first of all, I don't know how to preface this other than with the fact that you're probably not going to believe me, but I don't know what I saw today.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing I can ascertain is that it's probably like a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And she's like, come on, you're like, and I'm like, look, this is what, come with me, come to where I saw it, and it was already dark at that point when she'd gotten home from work. But regardless, it was like, again, trying to figure out exactly who I tell first, how I start talking about it. And the very first person I reached out to actually was John Bindernagel in the U.S., who's a well-known biological or bio-researcher for wildlife and all sorts of things like that. I believe he works at one of the universities, and he's written a number of books. He turned me on to a guy up here who worked for the BFRO, who sent a couple researchers. And as we're going through my story, and I'm taking them to where all this kind of happened, and this is actually months after the fact, they're like, well, we're going to go and look up some information about your area. And then when they got back to me, I find out that this area, since the 20s, has had reports of strange things like this. And but just years before what I think I had my sighting, a car of 4 people were coming up north out of a little town south of us, and they came up to an open field. And a very similar thing where they slowed the car down thinking they were going to hit a deer, and what they actually saw was, what they said, a jackrabbit-sized running man running along the side of the car. And when I read that in the report, jackrabbit, when that thing came bolting out of that bramble, like I was mentioning, it had that like front legs to back, front to back, front to back, front to back, and I'm like, what the? Like, how can that's not a person?
Yeah.
And I thought, and then when I started talking to guys I know that hunt and stuff, I'm like, hey, Bill, You've been hunting for 40 years or whatever. Like, have you ever seen a black bear do this? He's like, no, trying to rationalize it again in my own mind.
Trying to figure out what creature moves like this and tried to explain it away, basically.
Yeah, because that's what your mind wants. Am I anthropomorphizing something? Is this just a black bear? But no, because it's like that's the other thing. Recall on the moment sometimes is not right. Like within seconds after you're seeing something, it sort of filters in like 10 or 20 minutes after, like an accident. When you're like, oh right, and then that guy was standing on the corner. I forgot about the same thing. When you've seen like Gina Goodall or some of the ladies and people have done research on mountain gorillas and the way they coax them, or they are not even coax them, but they have to approach them really quietly. They'll come sort of like rambling out of the jungle line. And you know how that, like, when something with a lot of mass stops, because I've worked with a lot of big animals, cattle specifically, the body mass undulates forward, and you cannot help but see the fur and everything sort of shake a little bit. That's what I remember after coming in, was like this, like, man, like whatever it was big. I remember thinking to myself, it had a lot of mass, because when it had finally did that last stop and then stood up, it had that kind of like shake to it almost. And again, it's like trying to process exactly what it is that I'm seeing, and then trying to explain it to somebody. That's the harder part.
Yeah. Now, about how tall do you think the creature was that you saw?
Well, after doing we went down, my wife and I, much later, and where it was standing, there's like a small cedar tree. And we took a tape measure. We measured the cedar tree, and it was about a foot taller than that little cedar. So it's about 7 feet 2 inches tall.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard different heights for some of these Bigfoots. Like I said, probably about 16 feet tall at max. But most sightings are like 8 foot.
Well, I was doing a show with M.K. Davis, who's done a lot of research on the PG film, and some of his analysis of the film itself. And he figures that Patty, he refers to her as, because he believes the film sort of speaks for itself.
Yeah, she's
about 7.5, 8 feet tall, and he figures with a mass of about 650 pounds. But again, that's estimate based on his analysis as a NASA researcher using all these crazy programs trying to determine all this stuff about the film. So, I'm going by what I see in a tape measure and where I am, which is, quite a distance away, and then measuring it much later. But I remember it was much taller than that tree. And I was using the tree as a litmus test to kind of give me a basis for where it was.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, you mentioned about it being on all fours. Now, there are such creatures up in that area. The Dogman of Michigan comes to mind. And I'm wondering if this creature looked like a Sasquatch, or if it could have been, or if it kind of looked like a wolf.
The balaclava thing, and that see, this is the thing. It's like the head seemed to be pointed, like weirdly elongated, and not like overly robust. It was definitely like, round. It wasn't like square or like some sort of a weird diamond shaped or anything. But that's why I guess my first interpretation was, when somebody slaps on a balaclava and it's got like the pointy top.
Yeah.
Right. It had that kind of higher head to it. Right. But facially, when it started, like you were asking about running on all fours, I remember that's when it didn't seem as like svelte. It seemed to be much wider when it was running towards me on all fours than it was when it was standing straight and when I was looking at it, because it was in profile looking at the bush to wherever the coyotes were all like still yipping and stuff. And when it crouched down, that's when they got quiet. And then it came bolting out, and then that's when its position changed. So now it's facing me, so it's turned to its left, and it starts running front legs to back legs, front legs to back legs. And again, at that point, that's when I realized, like, it seemed like, shoulder pad-y, like football player shoulder pad shoulders, which were, not as easy to determine when it was standing sideways. It seemed to be almost really like skinny, but again, like, dark, and the face was completely dark. It was almost like, you got to remember, I'm on my knee, turning, looking over my shoulder, and trying to figure out whether or not should I start like running back to the house, or so. And then when I saw it stand up, there didn't even seem to be like eyes, and like, because it's like the face itself is like shadowed by its own features almost.
Yeah.
And as it had turned, I only caught a glimpse of its face for like 2 to 3 seconds when it stood up, and it turned to its left. So it was for a very short period of time, like I said, that I got to see the actual face. And it's like, describe the person's face that mugged you. They mugged me. It's you're going through this whole process, and at the same time you're trying to record it, to memory, right?
Yeah, and of course nowadays there's all these people with cell phones that can record, but back then with the Patterson film, they didn't have that stuff readily available. So, people that had sightings like you and me, we didn't have that stuff so readily available. So we couldn't say, well, this is this, or here's the proof and everything like that. So we had to try and convince other people of what we saw.
Well, yeah, and you tell the story, and then they say, why didn't you take a picture of it, or why didn't you have your phone? I'm like, because the circumstance wasn't about me seeing something strange. I was like, put my dog in the house because I was worried that coyotes were around. And when I went to try to figure out why the hell that they were all like freaking out, maybe they were ripping something apart in the back part of this is what I saw. So I didn't have my phone with me, and I didn't even think of taking it with. I was going to the garden to do a whole bunch of work to begin with, so I didn't have my phone with me. Or a camera or anything like that. So again,
you weren't expecting to see it. And, no. But yeah, there's always going to be skeptics in this world. They're going to be like, even with the Patterson film, there's skeptics that say, no, it's a man in a suit or something like that. But we're going to get into that whole video a little bit later on in the show. But go ahead.
No, I was saying that's awesome, because I had the privilege of, being able to be on a show with MK, and for 2 hours, he filled me in on a bunch of things that I just had no idea about. And the research that he does do and his background is about analysis, and any kind of thing that he does sort of put through his scrutiny. He's very diligent about making sure he's dotted his I's and crossed his T's. And I think what he's basically saying is, like, this film speaks for itself. Everything about it and what is going on and what is occurring in it is legitimate. It hasn't been altered. There was some stuff, because he got to meet Richard Gimlin's wife. And
I hate to cut you off. We're at the break.
Ahead, man. Go ahead, Phil. It's all good.
We'll be right back with my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot, his sightings, and some other things in the paranormal field.
a human being whose cruciform control, no longer in search of meaning, I'll utilize my soul to be a messenger, to be a radical, to be love. Be a messenger, be a radical.
Are you a ghost hunter or paranormal enthusiast and need equipment to go out and investigate locations that have spirit activity? Well, GhostStop.com has all the equipment that you will need. They have a Boo Buddy ghost hunting kit for $169.95, or how about a Keep Calm and Ghost Hunt t-shirt for $19.95. Click on the banner ad at the top of the Talking Tonight website and get shopping today. GhostStop.com, your one-stop shop for all your ghost hunting needs. Do you have a paranormal team? Are you a small-time author? Do you have a radio show that you would like to promote? Is there anything that you would like to get the word out there about but don't have a big budget? Well, Talking Tonight has an opportunity for you to sponsor the show without breaking your wallet. Contact the show at talkingtonight@outlook.com or on the show's website or Facebook page for more details. Do you think you have a haunted or cursed object? Well, Nicole Gaspard does, and in her book Haunted Vessels and Cursed Objects, she talks about her continued paranormal and supernatural ghost encounters, haunted dolls, and other items that are supposed to be haunted or cursed. Pick up your copy today on Amazon.com.
It's a cookie to crack, but I hope I don't crumble. Singing, hey, 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 sha-la-la-la-la-la. And you'd think a heart attack could make you humble. Singing, hey, 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 sha-la-la-la-la-la. And in a word, we're self-described here as absurd, and implications, well, they're singing across the nation, singing, hey, 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 sha-la-la-la-la-la. And in the cure, well, you can be rest assured in incarnation. Now leave your hesitations and sing, hey, 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 sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. Singing, hey, 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 sha-la-la-la-la-la. And now
Okay, and we are back with my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot, his sightings, and the research into it. So, before the break, we were talking a little bit about your sighting, and we also brought up the Patterson film. And during the commercial break, we were talking about M.K. Davis and stuff like that, and his take on that Patterson film. For those that do not know, of course, the Patterson film is the famous Bigfoot video that most people have seen. So what is your take and M.K. Davis's take on the Patterson film?
Well, I think it's MK's because it's like, if people understand his background first, I mean, for almost 35 years he worked for NASA as a photo analyst and working for, aerospace technology, trying to make photos clear. His job was working with programs and technology that gave him the ability to bring clarity to deep space photography. And with that, he took those skills and applied them to a number of different phenomenon films, if you will. He's done it with the Zapruder film, with the JFK assassination. But his main passion for many years, and he's got umpteen filing cabinets filled with information, was the Patterson-Gimlin film. This is the thing about MK, is once again, he's always pointing out that the film speaks for itself. His opinions about certain things are based on his analysis. So, for instance, one of the things that was really hard for people to see because you got to remember, a long time ago when they were first showing even those clips on television, it was not always easy to figure out exactly the depth or the clarity of it, or certain things. MK's work has basically been able to blow it up, slow it down, cut it in frame by frame to be able to really look at each, let's say, animated movement of whatever this is. And one of the particular frames that everybody knows from the classic shot is the turn and the face sort of looking at the camera. And years ago when they showed it, the film happened pretty quick. It wasn't running in slow-mo, and at the same time, it was really hard to see those kinds of things in the profile. This animal, and I'm calling it an animal, but it's a cryptid, I guess. At the same time, has breasts. These are definitely mammary glands that are on this creature. There are musculature features that are on this particular frame, and frames where you can see herniations in the muscles. You can see certain things about the bottoms of the feet. And with that, MK's opinion, and I believe, and sort of, it's a legitimate film. One of the things about his research behind how it was shot, when it was shot, how it was developed, is in depth. And one of the things he found odd was that when that film was shot, it happened in the time frame of the latter half of the week. And with them coming out of the bush and relaying the information in the story, they were able to ship it to, I believe, a place in San Francisco for processing over the course of a weekend, which didn't really happen back then. So he's just sort of like, well, they either had to have known somebody or somebody that helped them with the processing to help expedite the process so they could get it out to the press. But they also actually waited for a period of time before they even released it to the press, even though they had the ability to develop it as quickly as they did.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the reason why, and reason Gimlin apparently was very reticent about, saying I want to be a part of this, or I'm willing to tell the story as to what happened. There was a lumber fraud issue that was going on, and he felt that, if this was sort of tied into this, that this would just bring like a dark cloud over the whole thing in its entirety. So it's like he didn't want to be involved as a result of that. So so in a weird way, that's where MK just sort of questions those kinds of things, as well as after visiting Mrs. Gimlin, because she became like sort of curator of the rest of the bits of film. He'd combed through these like old boxes that she had in the garage or something like that, and found original clip snips of the original film that weren't actually a part of the original film. And she was wondering why this had been done, and she really didn't have an explanation. But, it was part of the small grouping of little documentaries that he did to sort of talk about his experience doing that. But I think that the film, like MK says, it sort of speaks for itself. There's definitely something that is hard to put a finger on when it comes to really looking at the motion of this thing and the sort of mechanical, like I say, the mobility work that's been done on it, about like mechanics in terms of the way things move, the work that's been done on the type of camera that was used and how large this creature could be. There's a lot of things that for me, he says, a lot of, like even Bindernagel will say, we should put that film to bed. There's so much argument about whether it is real or it's not that we need to move on from there. And I think MK is like, well, the film speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And I agree with him. I think that it's the real deal.
Yeah. Now, I've listened to the recording of you on the another show with MK Davis, and you talked about, or both of you talked about the movement of Patty, and as far as the turning, care to elaborate on that?
Well, the turn, MK had also said something to the effect that, well, according to Gimlin and Patterson, it was that they had kind of startled this creature as they came up upon it, and they were on horses, and that after getting off the horse, he kind of fumbled off the horse, and that in that process, the animal's moving around. That's when he managed to stabilize the camera just before then, and that's when she turned to look at the camera. So, what I think MK was also saying too is that, like, she just didn't want any part of it. She wanted to get out of that area as quickly as she could, and she, he keeps referring to her as she, obviously because of what I was saying, but. I think that frame itself, it says a lot. Like, there's so much work that has been done on that, and that particular frame alone. Even the whole, like, if you know the story about the slight manipulation of the hand, and then somebody recut it, and then they claimed new rights to the actual photo as a result of that. So there's one that's floating around that actually it is, but it isn't the original.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion on it. I mean, she was probably looking to try to figure out, like anybody would, like me.
Like, what the heck's going on?
Yeah, what the heck's going on? Look over your shoulder and get out of there, right?
Yeah, so there was no unhuman-like movement of Patty, basically.
No, he was basically saying that the way that she moves, because of the way that the shoulders turn, it's indicative of more like an ape-like thing, because the head itself is almost set into the body more, not like it doesn't have neck muscles. But to turn in terms of profile, we have that sort of almost, 120-degree turn to either side. The body would need to slightly turn to its left in order to see exactly what was going on in its profile. So, and then again, he was saying, like, well, here's the other thing that he was referring to after his talk with a bunch of indigenous people out in that neck of the woods, that there are different breeding species of what we're seeing. Like the timber giants themselves, like you were referring to, that can be like 15, 16 feet tall. They're more of like the purebred version of the Bigfoot. And then there are times, and this is where the Aboriginal stories sort of coincide, is that women are stolen from the tribal areas, and then they are impregnated, and there's a new type of species that is born. He feels that Patty's more of a hybrid between something that's closer to part Aboriginal and part timber giant. And that's where the height variances sort of come into play. And he's a firm believer of that, especially after talking to so many Aboriginal people.
Yeah, well, there's different names for Bigfoot. The Sasquatch name actually comes from indigenous tribes in British Columbia, but there's other names from, such as the skunk ape in the Florida and the South.
Grassman.
Grassman. Trying to think of all the names.
Yawa. There's the Yeti. There's like in the Himalayas. There's Almastay. There's so many different, and that's the thing. It's crazy you bring that up, because some Aboriginal communities and villages themselves are named or partially named after that sort of, totemistic kind of, Sasquatch was here. Like you're talking BC with Sasquatch. If you go through the Rocky Mountains down in the U.S., through Colorado, there are a number of towns that are almost like a road map of where you could see if it was a migratory animal, it wasn't maybe habitually moving to certain areas as a result of climate and seasonal change. It almost seems like a pathway from north to south and then back again. And I've heard something very similar about the whole Ottawa Adirondack corridor that goes down, obviously, into New York State, Pennsylvania, and down into Florida, even, for that matter. And that's where even I've heard the stories about the Ohio Grassman. So who knows? I mean, some of the BFRO things that I've heard, they're not divergent in opinion. But some will say, well, they think that they are habitual and that they are in an area and they'll stay in that area for a period of time, winter and summer. Yeah. And others will say, well, no, they're actually moving from A to B, just like we would as hunter-gatherers. Bears do it. Blackberries are in season, blueberries are in season. It's summer in Canada. They're up here. And as things change, they start moving down to Northern California and Montana and different areas that are, warmer. But again, oh wow, it's just I feel lucky to have seen what I've seen, but at the same time, it almost feels like a bit of a hindrance because I'm having to explain it sometimes and wonder then what people really think about you because of that. It makes it kind of, again, ties into what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that fear factor. Well, here we go again. Ed's telling his story, and I don't do it anymore. I've never sought anybody to try to, have me on a show or to try to make money for it. I'm just fortunate that I've been able to do it. And some of the Aboriginal people that I've told the story to will say, well, you know what? You don't go looking for Bigfoot or Sasquatch. They find you, and they find you for certain reasons. It's kind of like when you have a spiritual moment or something happens as a consequence of, the cosmic ether. There's a reason for these things again, and that are far sort of, more attached to the greater meaning of your existence and experience. A story to somebody in a book or in a song can illuminate them and make them feel great or change their perspective about certain things. For me, it's definitely changed my perspective on how I see the world.
Yeah. And, I mean, there are other thoughts on what these creatures actually might be. I've heard people describe them as even interdimensional beings, and that's why they're so hard to find. And what do you think about something like that?
I mean, on a level of physics, dimensionally, we know that we live in a multiverse, really, and the theory of this is a reality. Why something couldn't at some point through a period of natural evolution that, in my opinion, we're sort of de-evolving. We're so reliant on so many things to placate us that, when I go out into nature, I feel weak. And not weak like, I couldn't move branches around or start a fire, go fishing or something. It's like I'm always amazed, even from spiders to whatever it is that I'm like just sort of I'm lucky enough to see and sort of realize or look at it in a certain way that you get shown light, kind of. But could they? Well, maybe as a result of that. I mean, I've heard Aboriginal people talk about that possibility. And if we have lost that sense of connection with nature or ourselves, let's say, bioorganically or biocosmologically, then maybe, we are de-evolving, and that is more of a state of like natural, evolving.
Yeah.
And if they have the ability to do it or move between frequencies, I mean, hey man, we're trying to build a hadron collider to just to understand, the magnitude of how stars are created, So at the same time, nature has the most incredible way of getting through something and evolving past the point that I think that we're incapable of at this point.
Yeah. Well, for those that do not know what cryptozoology is, actually it means hidden animal. So technically they are hidden, but as you said, they're not going to make, or you don't go out looking for them. They're going to come and find you.
Yeah, and maybe there are, look, the mountain gorilla was a legend until, what, the 40s or early 50s or something? Mm-hmm. There are species from insects to amphibians to fish to any kind of flora and fauna that you can think of that are being discovered on a daily basis. They may not be mega fauna, huge animals, but you look at the stats on the ocean. Like, we know little to nothing about the ocean. We know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than we know about our own ocean.
Yeah, we know more of outer space and what's going on out there than we know in such parts of the ocean, such as the Mariana Trench.
Yeah, so I think if something really wanted to stay hidden, it could. I don't think that, it's impossible with, how advanced things are. Look, man, I've traveled across Canada, the United States, touring in bands and playing my own music. And I know, even in Pennsylvania, it's, expansive in the mountains and the trees and parts of British Columbia that I've been. You could hide like dinosaurs up there.
Oh, yeah. Or like the Appalachian Mountain Range. I mean, I've traveled through quite a bit of that, and there is plenty of wide open spaces, basically, where anything can hide, and you're not going to cover it all.
No, of course not. And if you were stealthy and you were svelte and you had strong, 8 feet tall, and you could run and crawl and climb. That's again what I was getting at. In comparison, on a physicality level, even between chimps. People have to realize a full-grown chimp can rip apart a man. It will rip a man's arms off.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about a 6-foot animal. So again, if a chimp wants to hide in the jungle and stay hidden, it'll stay hidden. You won't find it.
Yeah.
You got to do a lot of searching and hunting and tracking and all that other kind of stuff. And that's the other thing, where the skeptical sort of mind kicks in on terms of physical evidence. Where is the physical evidence of certain things? Where's the body? Where's the skeleton? Where's the, we don't have that. We really, but we do have circumstantial physical evidence, with people like Todd Meldrum, where he's collecting these footprints. And I know Jimmy Chilcutt down in the U.S., he's staked his reputation on a lot of different things, but at the same time, some of those things with dermal ridges, the way that the mechanics of the foot has laid the print, Jeff is, a firm believer that some of those casts that he has are real, and he's a reputable wildlife biologist professor. He's not just somebody coming out of a shack and saying something, whatever it is. It's hard research. I guess that's why reaching out to some of those people and hearing what they have to say, even though they are who they are, they have the ability to scrutinize the material the way that they do. Many of them are still ridiculed by the scientific community as a result of that. And that's not, that even with Bindernagel, I've heard him say before, he's like, it's about keeping an open mind when it comes to research. And if you shut it off immediately, and it's right, what is the physical evidence? All those things a skeptic would say. That's still not enough, even in police investigations. They'll say, well, where's the circumstantial evidence? Where's the gun? Where's the body? I don't know, but they're still going to pursue the investigation wholeheartedly until it goes cold case, and even then after it goes cold case, it'll still be looked at. So it's the same kind of thing. There's been too many things for so long, hundreds of years, that have been reporting different things like this, not only in the Western Hemisphere culture, the Aboriginal communities, we're talking about Europe, we're talking about the Asian theater. All of those places around the world have something that is related to this sort of beast-like creature that lives on the outer rim. And it's hard to see, find, catch, hunt, but again, there's other things too that are hard evidence that have come in with hair samples. Some people have done some research in the last little while, and they've come up with things that are non-definable. They're not on the simian chart. They're not on the human chart. They don't know what they are. So the follicle is telling the story. We don't have the body attached to it, but there's something in the sense of validity for the skeptic there, hopefully, to make them look at the evidence a little harder.
Yeah. Well, there's always people that are going to help the skeptic's case. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this case, but I believe it was down in Georgia where a couple of guys claimed they killed a Bigfoot and stuffed it into this little meat locker. And turns out that it was just a bear suit or something like that was stuffed with raw meat.
Oh, I heard about it, and they had it in a freezer. It was frozen for a little while.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the Justin Schmeha shooting, that he claims he had shot a young Bigfoot and an adult, and that they had taken the body. There was the quote unquote steak that they had to analyze, which was like this hunk of meat with fur on it, and when it came back as bear. And again, that's where my skeptic mind, needs to know on that level. It's like getting the report from a newspaper saying, well, we track these things that we don't understand, and we're telling the public about it. So again, those things are the things that destroy the validity to all the other things that are out there.
Oh yeah,
because they're so hoaxified. It's and they're trying to make money, and they were dangling it in front of people like the carrot in front of the donkey, and we'll show it to you soon, and da da da, and it was all just like packed with like meat, like in. It drove me crazy but when it started coming out, I was like, I don't know, like almost right from the very beginning, it seemed to have that air of like sideshow freak thing.
Yeah, it reeked of pretty much fakes. I just can't really describe how I thought about it, but I mean, it just didn't seem right.
Right, and there's charlatans with everything. I mean, even including those that are trying to make money off of the fanciful. So, but again, I think what's the allegory of it all in terms of like it happening for so long in many cultures is enough for me. And I think you and many other people we probably know to sort of keep an open mind about it, keep asking questions and looking for more information about it, because who knows, ladies and gentlemen, one day there may be that moment in time where somebody comes in and says, check this out, and it'll be, but maybe it won't, maybe there's something about, it's just like with the alien factor. I mean, there's a lot of videos that are out there. We know some of them are hoaxes. They've been proven as hoaxes. Yeah. But there are a lot of people, reputable people. We're talking like military, like colonels, police officers, people in the fire department, doctors, all people that are like not out for the charlatan factor. They're there to tell a story about something that they saw, They can't understand it, but they're trying to explain it, and they want people to know. I mean, it's just like, hey, I'm not going to tell somebody I burnt the toast. I'm going to tell them, if somebody's amazing is occurring, you want to know about it. Yeah. And hear about it. So, and there may not be the full, complete factor behind this is everything that happened. Here's the photo, here's the video, here's the layout, and all that. The holes in it, promote the idea that it maybe didn't happen. But when it's coming from somebody that has nothing to gain other than just to tell the story, I think that brings even more validity to it than anything.
All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour. We'll be back with more with my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot and all aspects of the paranormal, and also your phone calls. Chat room is open on Spreaker if you want to chat with me and ask questions there. We'll be right back after this short commercial break.
Boy, was he a neat kid. He had all sorts of really cool things to play with, like a plutonium spaceship lunchbox and a bathtub full of Lego. And I didn't believe you when somebody said that he fled with Jimi Hendrix to a UFO type base camp up on Machu Picchu. Up on Machu Picchu. I said, excuse me, it's not my fault.
Do you have a talk radio, Facebook Live, or YouTube show and would like guests for your show but don't know where to go to get them? Well, go to radioguestlist.com and sign up today. They have all different experts in different fields, and you can find the ones that are just right for your show. That's radioguestlist.com. Sign up today. It's free.
If you like finding out about different things in the paranormal field, such as ghost stories, haunted locations, UFOs, cryptozoology, and much more, well, check out Into the Paranormal on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Videos are posted once a week. Be sure to check out the show's website at talkingthenight.weebly.com for some great content such as Story of the Day, This Day in History, and much more. Also, if you missed the show, check out the show's archive page under the radio show tab where you can find all the shows listed. And be sure to sign up for the Talk in the Night newsletter.
So fast, twice the speed of sound itself and doubling up in mass. Time is speeding up so fast, twice the speed of sound itself and doubling up in mass. Time crept up on me, yeah, and I couldn't ride the wave.
To call into the show, Skype Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. And now, back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil. Okay, and we are back in the second half of the show with my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot and other aspects of the paranormal. And we were talking about evidence of these creatures and the skeptics and stuff like that. But the way I look at it is, being in the paranormal field so long, that skeptics are like the checks and balances for those that truly believe or had sightings of such creatures and everything like that. They keep us on our toes to think about it But at the same time, it can be reversed to where we make the skeptics think, okay, well, maybe what he's saying is actually true.
You couldn't be more right. You couldn't be more right. I mean, it's good to have skepticism. That's healthy. And I think that's what brings good research to the forefront. And there are skeptics who have been converted as a result. You must know in your own world of the paranormal research field that, like, if you're on a site and it has a reputation of spiritual activity and there are things, new devices, even just simple things from EMF detectors to, I mean, the SLS cameras that they have for mapping. That's some pretty interesting stuff that's going on there as far as the way it interacts with questions and answers and circumstances. Bill Chappell, that cat in the United States, has been building some pretty incredible equipment for sort of diagnosing areas and things like that. And people who have been sheer out, no, you guys are crazy, you know, this is nuts. They go in, have that experience working with those people in that field and a physical medium. And it changes them completely. Or people that have been interviewed, they have never had a paranormal experience in their life at all. They can't even recall one when they were a kid or anything. And then all of a sudden they're like 50-something, and something happens to them, and it changes them forever because there's no way that they can explain it. And then that's the other thing, too, with research with those kinds of places all over. Hard research, whether it be who built the house, who was living there prior to that, did somebody die, what were the circumstances during that, what happened to the land before that, what was this land, what was here before this, there's so many levels of it that it almost in its own state, even with listening to some physical mediums, there are spirits here that are arguing with each other for supremacy. As a result of the environment and whether they're stuck there in a feedback loop or they're in visitation, or it's a resident spirit, if you will. All of those kinds of things will completely, again, change that person's perspective because, again, it's too hard to rationalize. Even in my own experiences, and if I'll tell a certain story, and people will be like, usually it will procure some kind of chill or freak the people out because it has attachments to the impossible. In terms of if you had bought a lottery ticket over the course of a week, one day a week, and you won each day. That's how almost next to impossible it could be. Coincidentally, people say, well, that's just coincidence. And I'm like, there's no way that these things, because they all concurrently occurred in this way that brought about this state of holy cow, what just happened here, right? And it's not even deja vu, ladies and gentlemen. It's and again, it reaffirms. And it doesn't always happen. That's the thing, Phil. It's if you try to go to recall on those moments when those things occur, for me, some of them have been okay, a friend passes away. That's a traumatic experience. You're close to them, whatever it might be. So people say, well, you're anthropomorphizing something and try to make it, fill in the blanks for yourself emotionally. And no. There's no way, because if you were a cop, once again, and you were a detective, you would follow a coincidence as a lead. If there's two of them side by side, you go, wait a minute, that's almost next to impossible. And then it might lead to a third, which goes, okay, this is an investigation. Let's do all our work and see if we can get a warrant. But when it happens in our own personal experiences, in that people almost don't want to believe it. I got a buddy of mine so close; he's my producer, he's an engineer. When I bring up stories he doesn't want to hear them. Yeah, because it freaks him out. It almost terrifies him.
Yeah. So and of course, you bringing back from the start of the show that fear of flight. just the thought of it brings up the fear that, okay, I don't want to know about this. I want to run away from it.
Comfort zone, exactly. But, somebody once said to me, when you're afraid, you're learning something. So, I mean, that's the thing about the paranormal. The thing that happened, okay, I'll tell, if I can't tell the story quick. So a buddy of mine passed away. We're having the wake. It's evening. It's late November. I go out to the street, get some air. These 3 kids are walking by. They're talking about this story about how they're going to craftily break into a junkyard in the middle of the night to, like, steal a door, to, like, stick on the side of their parents', like their buddy's parents' car because they're away. And I can hear this little, because they're standing kind of on the corner and they're almost pacing worried, like a bunch of 17-year-olds would do, right? and I said, wait a minute. I said, and then they looked like, startled. And I'm like, I'm not a cop. I said, just, can I talk to you for a second? I said, look, I did this exact thing with a buddy of mine that just passed away. And I can't believe that I'm standing here on the street arbitrarily and you guys are walking by and you're talking about doing this exact same thing. I said, look, we're having the wake upstairs. Would you come upstairs with me so I could tell my friends? Because they won't believe me if I go back in and you're not with me to confirm the story. So, okay, sure. The 3 of them walk upstairs. There's about 30 or 40 of us still kind of kicking around. And take off my coat. And, there's sort of chatter. And I say, hey, everybody. I said, listen, I was just telling them the story. I was on the street, da-da-da. The kids come by, da-da-da. And they all go white. And I said, and it's quiet, and nobody responds. I said, what's wrong? And everybody said, Ed, we were all here just talking about that story.
Yeah.
I freak out, and all I can think of is it's my buddy. It's my buddy turning the ether wheel for synchronicity to be so sweet that in the moment somebody like me, who's maybe more open to this kind of stuff, would be there to interpret what it was, right? I saw that as like a sign from the other side, right? And everybody in that moment, when I still bump into them today, like, so and so, blah 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 blah, they'll tell the story. Hey Ed, you remember at Bain's wake when you came upstairs and it affected them so much in that moment that they had a hard time believing it themselves. And everybody was like, it's him. It's him. He's doing it to us. He's screwing around with us, right? He's playing around with us. And then again, people are like, usually when I mention the story, they're like, oh, man, I just like that's next to impossible for that to occur. I'm like, yeah, it's because it was my buddy.
Yeah, and it's something that happened, and maybe his spirit was there just kind of whispering in each other's ears to talk about that, because he knew that you were outside talking to somebody else that was thinking of doing that.
Yeah, and the fact that he was just a trickster himself, he laughed like Ernie, from Sesame Street. And we used to have tractor races together when we worked on the farm, and he was just a bit of a wild man. And I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that, So I have that experience, and I go, this is bigger than me. It has that feeling in it that it isn't perpetuated by some phoniness. I'm staggered by the moment. I'm still staggered by it. Yeah. And again, it's like, so if I tell that story to a skeptic, does it change their opinion? I don't know. Do they need validity from the other 30 or 40 people and the 3 kids on the street that they were there? I don't know, maybe. Yeah. But it's enough for me. It's enough for me to still have my, peripheral spiritual pineal gland kicked in a high gear most of the time. Trying to feel those things more so when they're occurring, and not ignore them or dismiss them as something that's phony or false. And then again, those things that sometimes don't bring clarity to what it was until later. I remember when we moved into this farmhouse almost 11 years ago now. Hard to believe, but I was making like toast, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and all of a sudden I could smell my dad. He passed away when I was a young man, but he, his aftershave, the smell of him coming in from the barn, his BO, I'm sorry, but it's true, and I started to cry, and my buddy who's on the other end of the phone said, "What's wrong?" And I just immediately went, "My dad was just here." And it was, and it hit me. He was happy that I got this place, and that he knew that I wanted to keep farming in my life, and I come from that background. It was just kind of like, "Hey, son, I know I haven't been here for 25 years, but I love you and I'm happy for you." Yeah. But what was weird is later, months later, I started to think about it, and I was thinking about it a lot, obviously. But I went, of all the things that he could have approached me with from the spiritual realm, it was scent. And scent is a very powerful memory trigger.
Oh yeah,
my dad had the most precise sense of smell. He was knighted in France, in Burgundy, because of the nodes and the things that he could smell in certain wines. You couldn't get anything past my dad because he'd smell it. So of all the things that he chooses to manifest, it's odor. And what does it trigger? All of those things. And I just think, man, you bastard, I love you. But it didn't hit me till later that's why it was what it was. It wasn't something else that was object related, or something that was related to psychometry or something. I felt something from an object. It was that thing that I remember the most about him was smell. So it was just, again, it didn't come until later,
Yeah, and there are been places that I've been that there is that distinct smell of somebody that brings back memories to somebody that from that location that knows that person. Then there are other ways the spirits connecting. But real quick, I got a question from the listening audience about Bigfoot, and the person wanted to know, have you ever seen that creature again?
No, I haven't. The only thing, as I was mentioning before, was there was that report that jackrabbit-sized running man. It struck me that the language that they used reminded me so much of that, like I said, that quadruped kind of thing, front legs to back legs, like a dog would run at high speed or something like that. But no, I haven't, and I've since been going back to the bush because I'm not afraid anymore. But I'm definitely looking for things like footprints or things that seem to be out of the ordinary. But again, no, I haven't. I wish, but no.
Yeah, it's when you look for it, or say you lose something, and when you're looking for it, you can't find it. But when you stop thinking about it or anything like that, you find it.
A watch Sasquatch never boils.
All right. So, have you ever? Because I know you talked about M.K. Davis and some other people in the cryptozoology film. Have you ever been out to the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, run by Lauren Coleman?
No, but that would be a great trip. Tell me more about it, Phil.
Well, I've never been out there myself, but he definitely he's into all the different cryptid creatures out there. Nessie, Champ, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Dogman, everything. So he devoted his life in this museum to the cryptozoology field all over the world.
Wow, man! And how long has it been running?
It's been a long time. I can't think of exactly how long it's been, but I know it's been over 20 years.
So what, does he have like a lot of paraphernalia, like cats?
Yeah, he actually has it's fake, of course, but it's like a stuffed Bigfoot. And of course, I got him as a friend on my Facebook page, which I'm going to try and bring him on my show at a later time.
There is one place I know of here in Ontario, Northern Ontario. It's about 12 hours north of where I am, half a day's journey, and you also have to fly in by bush plane, and it's called Snellgrove Lake. And there's been some shows and documentaries actually done on it. And Jeff Meldrum has been there as part of the investigation. And they've had some really interesting occurrences happen there. It's like a hunt cabin that's been ripped apart a couple of times. There's no roads in there, so you can only fly in. So whatever has come in there has completely destroyed the place. It's not black bear or brown bear. Usually brown bear and black bear will go after refrigerators, ladies and gentlemen, because the insulation almost reminds them the smell of honeycomb. And they'll knock a fridge over and start pulling all the insulative material out of the back of the fridge. But we're talking full sinks ripped out of the wall, countertops completely ripped off of the wall. There is like almost completely destroyed. And it's not like, kids can go up there for some kind of crazy weekend and do something stupid, right? It's like greatly isolated. But my brother and I and my nephew have been talking about taking like a fishing trip up there and spending like 7 days and just seeing what happens. Do some tree knocking, spend, most of the time probably out late at night, just even hanging around this particular location, because they've gotten some blood samples from a footprint. They've got some rock throwing that's been happening. And it scared a lot of people. Even, as I mentioned, Jeff was in the documentary, was almost like terrified. He had, I think, one of his sons with him, or one of the other researchers' sons with him, and the poor kid was just like, at first he was like, yeah, whatever, this is just crazy, you guys are nuts, and then by the end of it he was like, he wanted to go home because he was so afraid.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of neat places to check out all over the place.
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to have to get up there and check it out. Because I want to go up that way anyways to go to places like Salem, Massachusetts. Check out the covered bridges in Vermont and stuff like that. Just not in the wintertime.
Yeah, or hurricane season, man. My heart goes out to everybody on the eastern seaboard from Florida all the way up. That was just like crazy. Hurricane Michael.
Yeah, the hurricane that hit North Carolina, Florence, and then that one that just hit Florida and just brought all that rain back up to North Carolina. I
mean, there's some shots of like Pensacola that I saw, like everything's underwater, cars up to their windows. It's bad, so yeah. You got to go somewhere in the in-between season, between winter and hurricane or something. There's a sweet spot of 2 months or something.
Yeah, and I've heard that area is expecting some pretty nasty blizzards this year. So it definitely ain't going to happen this year, especially since I hate the cold weather.
Well, you and me both, Phil, and I'm a Canadian. And snow's a 4-letter word as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I went up to, I was dating a girl in British Columbia, and I went up there one Christmas, and and I stepped outside to have a cigarette, and I was like, and I had a thick, well-insulated vest on, a thick jacket on, covered pretty much head to toe with some warm weather clothes, and I was still shivering. It's like, forget this. I'm from Southern California. 60 is freezing.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, you know what? It gets cold. It gets really cold, bitter cold, when your face is hurting and you're outside. But it fluctuates, though, too, Phil, because, like, it can be pretty temperate through the winter. Like, 40 degrees. I'm doing the math in my head, but in as low as maybe 30, but not like 0. But I'm talking minus in Celsius here as well, though, too. Like, I've woken up one morning, it's minus 37 degrees Celsius outside. And but it's Canada. And if I had my choice, I'd be living somewhere in the equatorial part of the world.
Somewhere nice and warm and comfortable. But then again, you got that whole problem with, like, if you're down in the Caribbean, you got the hurricanes.
There's always something somewhere. If it's not that, it's an earthquake. If it's not that, it's the snow. If it's not that, it's the altitude. If it's not that, it's the flooding. It's, there's so many beautiful places all over the world that I'd love to visit, and they all go through their problems and changes. But, man, it just seems like there's been a bit of a ramp-up of a lot of stuff like that everywhere.
Yeah. Well, so, from where I'm from in Southern California, it's mostly earthquakes and fires. Right. But when you think stuff like tornadoes, you think the Midwest, Texas and stuff like that, where I'm at now, that's where they're going to hit. Well, everything seems to be kind of turned upside down a little bit, because there are earthquakes in Texas and Oklahoma, and I want to say about 10 years ago, not too far from where I was born and raised, there was actually a EF1 tornado that actually touched down and tipped a freight train over.
Whoa. But that's like, you're talking incredible wind speed with an EF1. We had an EF3 just touched down 3 weeks ago here just outside of Montreal. Mm-hmm. And, we as a kid, I remember big tornadoes or big storms like that were maybe once every 15 or 20 years. And now it's like almost a yearly occurrence. And I always say I live where tornadoes are born, because after you come off the Great Lakes, off of Lake Huron, there's a huge plain of space, and heat, tends to pick up off the plain, and before you know it, it's heading east, and people are getting hit. So, but again, you could walk down the street and get mugged, or you could walk down the street and get hugged.
Yeah. All right. Before we go into the break, the last break of the night, I wanted to ask you, when you had the sighting, or before you had the sighting, have you ever heard any type of scream? Because there are those reports of people recording like a strange scream that they report from like a Bigfoot creature.
No, it was the sounds of like coyotes that attracted me originally, because like I lived in rural areas my entire life, outside of the greater metropolitan area, in forested areas. I've been around a lot of wildlife, and I understand that usually that kind of activity doesn't happen in that early part of the evening. So it was that. This thing was quiet. It just seemed to be doing its own thing and being more observant of what these coyotes were doing, and maybe the coyotes observing it. And because I was upwind of it, that's what made me start to think maybe it's why it turned, got down and started running towards me as sort of like, with certain animals, even dogs, they'll sort of do like a little charge and then stop. Pigs will do this, cattle will do this, right? And it's sort of a defense mechanism to say, look, I'm making myself big, and then leave, because they really don't want a conflict. They're just like, don't mess with me. So that's the thing. It was almost like quiet, like still quiet. It was weird.
All right. Well, we're at our last commercial break of the night. We'll be right back with my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot, UFOs, and so much more in the paranormal field.
What is our estimated time of arrival? Tell me, what are my chances of survival? I'd say it's least to none, but at least I know I can't be outdone. I'd say it's more to some, but at least I know I'm having fun.
When you go to findingmargaret.com and mention Talking the Night, you can purchase a signed copy of the book Finding Margaret for just $10. Go to findingmargaret.com and send an email saying you heard about the book on Talking the Night and get your copy today. Just for Talking the Night listeners, go to joyelaine.com and get a free signed copy of Book 1, Path of Sweetness. To get to Joy's website, just click on the banner ad on the Talking the Night website. To purchase a signed copy of the CD Red Omen at 10% off, mention Talking the Night. With this purchase, you will get a free download of the Red Omen album and one of any other of Ed's album downloads, plus a special link to watch the new Red Omen video for a limited time. It's not available anywhere. Email Michael at mtsmanagementgroup.com to take advantage of this deal.
Be such a shame, left here in vain. Follow the kid, trying to find my groove. Just trying to find my groove. Just trying to find my groove. Got nothing left to prove but to myself, to myself. And if you sing with me, then you will plainly see that it's alright. It's alright. 4 strings of fury and 300 watts on my back.
To call into the show, Skype Talking the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. And now, back to Talking the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil. And we are back with my guest, Ed Roman, as we talk about Bigfoot and UFOs and stuff. And we've been talking about Bigfoot quite a bit most of the show. But I want to get into some of your other thoughts on, like, UFOs and extraterrestrials.
Well, that's book worthy, I guess, in terms of a question. I'm a firm believer in the whole alien thing, but to what level do I completely understand it? I can't answer it because I think it's so extensive, and there are so many tentacles
as to what it is, and some of the things we do know and some of the things we don't know. Again, it's one of those things where where's the physical proof? Mm-hmm. Where are the things that define that circumstance? There's a lot of things that go back far into history that some could argue are related to events of cosmic sort of moments. One of the things I remember as a kid, and my grandmother talking about it, of all people, was the book of Ezekiel. And there was in the Bible, and this whole thing about him seeing these golden wheels inside of a wheel and these illuminated beings coming out and taking Ezekiel up into the sky. And my grandmother believed in that kind of stuff. Other than her being a devout Catholic that she was, she also kind of played both parts of the field, if you will. I remember thinking, well, wait, if this is biblical, and it's been going back for such a long period of time, then maybe there is something to that on that level, because people are still going through these kinds of experiences today. And again, how much have they changed from what they were, or are they different? There's got to be, the universe is so big, and even dimensionally, that it would be ignorant of us, to think that we're the only things and people, living sentient beings that are here in the cosmos. So, and then there's other things though too that make it a reality for me. Like I believe in direct panspermia, and the discoverers of the DNA strand, Crick and Robertson. Francis Crick, in many interviews, was asked, what he thought about the DNA code and all these different facets and the development of human civilization, and the primordial soup things and Darwinism and how we evolved and the missing link. And what he said was basically this: you'd have the same chances of being able to direct a hurricane through a junkyard and have a fully fueled and flying, functioning 747 jet come out the other side than you would for the multitude of chemicals to amalgam together to allow evolution to get us to this point. And that in the analysis of the DNA code, that this thing that scientists still really can't analyze because it's referred to as junk DNA, doesn't fit into the cause or into the biology of the rest of the planet. We're the only people that have the species that have this faction of stuff. As we go through our own evolution as people, we have a propensity to study species, tear them apart, tag them, bag them, you name it. We've done everything, including genetically manipulate them and for our own purposes, plant and animal. So why would that be any different on that level if we ourselves then maybe are a direct result of this manipulation through this kind of a thing? I come from a background of people that worked with embryo transplants with cattle, and I know that my uncle had a gift for being able to look at certain animals and know that they should be bred together because you're going to have a better quality animal. And that's before Petri dishes and, being able to analyze all of those things genetically. He was just a gift that he had. And it's the same thing, I think, has been going on with us. People like you were saying before, Phil, you're so right. It's like they don't want to break out of the bubble of comfort to think that the possibility that we're actually the creation of some other living thing, because look, archetypes and dogma and religions and things around the world, promote the idea that God is this certain thing in whatever religion and state and form it's in. But at the same time, even in the ancient astronaut theory, or that whole aspect to, why not? Then the things that people have been seeing, even my own family experience, that sort of makes you sort of tie into all that stuff. Again, it's like a puzzle almost.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's your own personal puzzle, but it's one that you're grabbing pieces of from different parts of history to sort of go, well, this is kind of the roadmap. and there's got to be something more to it.
Yeah, there's so much out there in history that ancient Egyptians, it wasn't too long ago when they discovered the Baghdad Battery. And how did they get that kind of technology even way back then? The Stonehenge, how did they move those huge blocks? Or even Lee Scallion for Coral Castle.
Right.
How did he do all that alone without some kind of help from possibly extraterrestrial beings?
Well, and that's the thing. Some of the megalithic structures around the world, I mean, the Billback stone, some of those stones are 100 tons, 120 tons. It would be an engineering difficulty and marvel almost today to be able to cut stone that big, move it from as far as it came, and to put it into place with such precision. And not only that, these monuments themselves are laid out in sort of like lateral lines that are almost tied to some sort of geomantic electric ley lines that are all over the planet. That's the thing, again, with society, is that even in our own like quick historical background of like knowing who the Romans were, knowing who the Greeks were, knowing who the Phoenicians were, the Sumerians, all of those things sort of make us realize that societies and their strengths come and they go. And some of the things that they possess are probably in some ways not like the gadget version of high technology, but something else that offers a different form of understanding your human nature. So they perished. We have that possibility. Some may argue we're already headed down that road.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's ever changing and going through this metamorphosis. So, and I'm a firm believer in always looking back into history because I think it tells us a lot about our future. And one of those things is those connections to the unexplainable, the things that are, coming from somewhere else that connect to us for some reason. And it could be very well that they are our creators.
Yeah, and there's always going to be that unexplained thing throughout history. It goes way, 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 way back. When something new is discovered, it's unexplained, and there's always going to be that aspect of things where once we figure out something else is going to come along, and then it's going to be unexplained.
Right, and even the things that you can explain sometimes can be hard for people to fathom, to sort of take in and understand. Even the fanciful then becomes a whole new level, and even if it's not fantasy, it's a reality for some people, the experiences that they're having. I mean, we could probably go through a list of 1,000 experiences, popular culture experiences, from Travis Walton to Betty and Barney Hill to there's a whole list of contemporary occurrences. But again, how does it fit into the story? What is going on here? At the same time, is there some repetitiousness to what is happening, but there's a lot of differences to a lot of what is happening. All of that sort of, for me, again, amplifies that there's more to be looked at here. And to just poo-poo it or to go, no, and it's just, it's like in the movies, 4th of July. No, it's there's something else to this. And I can't turn away from it. I mean, I love talking about it, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, I've been in the paranormal field for a long time. I've had many experiences. But also, there are things that when I talk about them, it's hard to describe to people what I'm seeing and stuff like that. But when I get that validation that they like, I'll give you an example. I was talking to my friend last night on the show because I had a friend in Beverly Hills that lives 150 feet away from where the Manson murders happened. And,
I know that place.
And of course, I'm highly psychic. And of course, when the first time I went there, I didn't want to know nothing of the location other than the murders happened down at the end of the drive. That's all I wanted to know.
The La Bianca one, that area?
What's that?
With the La Bianca murders?
Well, no, it sits on Cielo Drive.
So it was Sharon Tate, yeah. So it's the Cielo location. I know, okay, and I know the house that you're talking about, too.
Yeah, the Omen house. Yeah, and I went there for a private... I went there for a private investigation, and my friend's driving. I'm doing all the navigation. And I'm looking at the map on my phone, and something told me, look at the map, zoom in on the house in that general area. And 40 miles away, I pointed out a spot on the map, and I said, there's a spirit portal right there. And I'm trying to show my friend as he's driving them down the freeway, and he's like, tell me when we get there. So we get there. I pointed out the spot to him and tell him what I saw on the map. And as soon as I told him, he told me to tell David Oman as soon as he came out of the house what I had just told him. So I started explaining. 40 miles away, I saw on my phone on the map, there's a spirit portal right there. And he looked shocked at first. Like, okay. But he proceeded to tell me that the same exact spot that I pointed out was when the house next door was being built, a 5-gallon bucket full of water tipped uphill.
What, at that location?
At the same spot that I pointed out on a map on my phone 40 miles away.
Did you go there?
As far as... I went to
after you got left, like we were with David, so did you go back to that other location of where the portal was?
Oh, no, it's right next to David Oman's house.
Oh, so you would just so happen to arbitrarily not know where exactly he was, and you pointed there.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I had never been there. All I knew is Cielo Drive. I knew the murders happened down the drive from his house. I had the address punched up in my phone so that way I could look at the map so we didn't get lost. But like I said, I didn't want to know anything of the location other than the murders. And I pointed out that at 40 miles away.
Wow. Because you're probably feeling it.
Oh, yeah. I've actually done readings and cleansing of homes from California for people in New York.
Wow.
I've done readings for people even across the pond over in parts of Europe.
That's crazy, man.
Without not knowing anything.
Yeah,
but a lot of people hear that and they're shocked. Like, how can you do that?
But that's where a good medium is attuned to things. There's a lady here that works with bereaving people who've lost family in circumstances, and you only call the number and leave your first name. And then she does the reading for you and anybody else that you want to invite. Usually it's spirit your friend or family members, excuse me. But she doesn't know anything about your background, your last name, nothing. It would be very difficult for anybody that was a charlatan to do any research on an arbitrary name, unless it was associated with a phone number and a callback. I don't think it works that way. But regardless, that's all. You don't work for much of anything, other than the people that you're with, as far as a medium is concerned. They're the ones who are the sort of gateway to allow those spirits to come through to communicate with the family, because they're the ones who are the interpreters. Usually, and I have the 2 hours of the session on tape. It's, okay, so-and-so is saying this, and they're bringing up certain things about the circumstance, because my wife had went after her cousin had died. And it's almost like you can hear somebody's talking to her, and she's just saying what that person had said and relaying it to the family.
Oh yeah.
So you become the mediator, right? The medium for the ability for them to come through, right? And in some cases, they overtake their body, right?
Well, I've never really had that happen. I've heard people say that they've had it happen to them, but what I do is I either hear a message or I'll see like a symbol that they give me. And it's just up to me to interpret, like if it's a symbol, it's up to me to interpret what that symbol means. Because a lot of times they're not going to actually say words.
Do you see auras, Phil?
I've been working on trying to do that, but I have yet to learn that trait.
Where like people can like read the blue-red aura factor, good bad vibe, like it's even saved them in certain circumstances. And
well, as far as reading people, I can do that, but as far as reading auras, I've yet to learn that trait.
Right, yeah, and that's obviously a different, it's like psychometry, like same thing, you're holding the object and getting the info. Not all mediums work that way, so.
Yeah, well, there are different types of mediums, clairvoyant, clairaudience, and stuff like that, and I have a lot of the traits of all of them, except for that one.
Yeah, does auto writing kind of tie into that too?
I believe so.
And then there's people that even like work like they sketch like what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Like, they draw it, right? Like.
Yeah, but like I said, that some people have that trait. That's one thing I never learned how to do, but it's not me. I do cleansing of homes. I've actually, one of the strangest experiences I've ever had is I was in a home in Southern California doing a cleansing, and then we communicated with the family's grandfather afterwards. And we're in this small room. The house had no electricity because they were selling the house, so they had no electricity in the house. 15 or 20 of us in this small, I want to say by 12 by 15 room, with the windows closed. Even at 5 o'clock at night, it was 105. And people across the room from me, as soon as I opened the doorway for that grandfather to go into the light, the whole room felt like a blast of cold air come off of me. And I mean, the temperature dropped from 105 all the way down to 70.
Wow. So let me ask you then, do you think that is like dimensional friction as a result of like the spirit being present in a frequency that is kind of rubbing, you know what I mean? So as a consequence, you have a temperature inversion, and it would go up, and then all of a sudden, consequently, if the spirit left, then all of a sudden there isn't that molecular, friction, and boom, you have a temperature drop.
That's quite possible. And of course, nobody really knows what happens after we die. Even the people that have near-death experiences kind of explain something different but similar in a sense. But until we get on to that other side, we'll never really know exactly what is causing that, because of course as spirits we're not going to have vocal cords to speak, so how do we hear EVPs? So there
like that's what I was going to say, EVPs, right? Like,
yeah, so it's how are these spirits talking, even to like somebody, me, that actually hears them with my own ear. It's playing on the energy of Earth, or the energy of people around, that I believe that helps these spirits create that either hot or cold spot, or the voice on digital recorders, or even some that have been audible, which I have heard. So it's just again, the energy.
A whole bag of different things.
Oh, yeah. And there's still so much that we don't know in the paranormal field that we can't explain. And even though I'm retired from the field, and where I got most of my experiences in the ghost and spirit realm, not so much on Bigfoot and UFO and other creatures, but I do love learning about them.
Well, yeah, and it kind of, circumnavigates that whole world, because it's like, to me, it's all fascinating, and it's so interesting, and it's actually one of the things, other than music and writing, that has really always kept gardening. My curiosity just at full tilt. Anything that from that realm, even if it's stuff I've seen, and I already know if it's what it is, if it's a hoax or they're still trying to figure out what's going on. I love it. It somehow there's something about it that helps me understand more about my living environment. That we take for granted a lot of things in our living environment, from the things that we are lucky to say we can do, to breathing. All of that, to me, is re-amplified by that amazing other world or worlds, and it keeps me active. It keeps me asking questions. It keeps my mind spry. I'm always trying to figure out, what is it? What did I see, or what did they see, or what happened in that circumstance, or why are they keeping that a secret? Yeah. It's fascinating, Phil.
Well, we're almost out of time. Do you want to let everybody know where they can pick up your music and everything like that?
Absolutely. You can get it at Amazon and iTunes, CD Baby. It's everywhere out digitally, actually. You can get it. The latest album is called Red Omen. There's a Facebook event page about the video, because it's also going to be tied into this fundraising campaign for children's tutoring programs that have dyslexia. So I'm really excited to share the music and the video idea. And, edroman.net is my website. Phil, I have to say thank you so kindly for having me on.
Not a pleasure.
A lot of fun.
It was a pleasure.
It didn't feel like 2 hours, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. It always is fun to talk with somebody that has the same thoughts as you, or even open to learning about new thoughts.
Well, that's just it, man, and hopefully we all learn something from each other. I mean, even if it's just telling the story, there are a lot of parables and all kinds of things that have gone generations and thousands of years because they're told and talked about. So it's healthy, man, and I really appreciate the opportunity. And thanks for spinning the music.
Not a problem. All right, and for those listening, tomorrow night, we're going to have open lines where you, the listeners, can call in, share your stories, experiences, or if you got questions about the paranormal, which I'm well in tune to, feel free to call in tomorrow night. Until tomorrow night, I shall see you on the dark side. Good night from Talking the Night.